I flew to New York and discovered that my son was dying while my daughter-in-law was at a party. My name is Margaret Ellison. I learned a long time ago that bad news doesn't knock. It slips in through the smallest crack between a ringtone and a heartbeat and rearranges your life before you remember to breathe. Trust me, you'll regret skipping this story. So before you sit back and listen, take a moment to like the video and subscribe to Grace's Truth. Now get in the mood to listen to this story because it might be the ultimate sweet revenge. It was just past 6 a.m. when my phone began its thin, persistent buzzing on the nightstand. I would have ignored it. Retired teachers have a discipline about mornings, but Saturday is sacred, if not for the number lighting up the screen. Unknown, New York. I don't have many reasons to get calls from New York except for two, my son Daniel and trouble. I answered on the second ring. Hello. My voice felt like paper. Mrs. Ellison. A woman's voice hushed like she was speaking from behind a door. I'm Nora. I live 2 floors down from your son, from Daniel. We've met once in the lobby last Christmas. I didn't remember her, but I remembered the lobby marble floor, a glass tree, and the way Daniel's wife smiled like the whole world was a lens. Yes, I said. What is it? I didn't know who else to call. Through the phone came the rumble of a city waking up, distant sirens, a delivery truck, the clank of a metal grate. He was taken in an ambulance during the night. I only knew because the doorman asked if I had his wife's number. She wasn't answering. She still isn't. The hospital is St. Anselm's on 71st. A hollow opened in my chest. What happened? I'm not sure. He's been sick for weeks. He tried to go to work 2 days ago and fainted by the elevators. I told him to call you, but... Nora's breath broke. I'm sorry. I just thought, a mother should know. A mother should know. The words were simple and merciless. I thanked her, hung up, and sat there staring at the braided rug my daughter made me in 10th grade. The house was so quiet you could hear the old furnace thinking. For a minute, I did nothing except hold the phone and listen to the blood in my ears. Then the teacher in me, the part that organizes chaos into a lesson plan, took over. I pulled the small suitcase from my closet. It still smelled faintly of my last trip lavender sachet hotel soap. Travel requires choosing, and choosing requires denial. 3 blouses or 4 flats or the old black heels that never forgive. I packed methodically as if good order could keep the bad thing away. On my dresser, a picture of Daniel at 12. He's holding a paper kite in the school parking lot, wind tugging it sideways. His eyes are laughing straight at me. I remember the day, a spring fair, the air full of popsicle and grass. He had insisted on painting the kite himself blue and orange with a crooked sun. If it flies ugly, it still flies, he'd said. I pressed my fingers to the frame. If it flies ugly, it still flies, I repeated, because sometimes you need a child to lend you courage from the past. I texted Daniel. I heard. I'm coming. Are you okay? The message turned blue and sat there like a promise I knew it couldn't keep. I tried his wife Sloane. Yes, like the boutique whose numbers are saved under both Sloane and S because she changes phones like earrings. Where are you? What's happening with Daniel delivered? Not read. By 6:30 I had booked the 9:05 to LaGuardia seat 22A because I always choose the window. The window lets you pretend you can steer with your eyes. I called a car, set a mug of coffee to brew, and only then allowed myself to notice that my hands were shaking. You'd think after a lifetime of teaching teenagers fights in hallways, parents who swore their angels never lied, lockdown drills that felt more real than fire alarms, I would be good at crisis. I am in the way that a swimmer can hold her breath. But no one teaches you what to do when your child tips toward a darkness you can't step into. There's no curriculum for that. I scribbled a note for my neighbor Janice to check the mail and feed the geraniums if I stayed more than a few days. She'll bring me a casserole when I come back. She always does when grief circles the block. I changed the sheets absurdly. Even now, I'm a woman who believes in returning to clean linen as if order has moral weight. The car arrived with its soft, anonymous interior and a driver who knew not to speak. The morning stretched pale and unsure, the kind of cold that steals from your fingers first. My town slid by, familiar and newly irrelevant: the bakery, where I still buy cinnamon rolls when Daniel visits. The park bench where I once told him to leave a girl who only wanted to rewrite him. The library he carried boxes for when the new wing opened. He was always carrying something: books, furniture, the heavier part of a joke. At the airport, every line felt too slow, every face too calm. The world oblivious, queued for bagels and newsletters. I moved through it like a ghost who could still be bumped. I sent another text to Sloan. Please answer. Which room is he in? I shouldn't say this, but I will. I never trusted her. There are smiles that are invitations and smiles that are mirrors. Hers reflected what you wanted to see. Devotion, softness. The shared language of expensive restraint. The first time we met, she called me Mrs. E because she'd heard my students did. It sounded like flattery, putting on my old classroom cardigan. I told myself she made Daniel happy. He said she understood ambition. I wanted that for him, someone who'd clap when he flew. Boarding felt like a slow confession, one body after another admitting they could only go forward. I found 22A and pressed my forehead to the cool plastic frame. The wing shivered awake. The ground loosened. As we rose, the town turned into a toy version of itself. Button roofs, thread roads. The river like a ribbon untied. I thought of Daniel at 5, demanding the window seat, and announcing what he saw as if the plane wouldn't notice without him. We're on top of the clouds, he'd breathed, and I'd pretended to be surprised. Somewhere over Pennsylvania, my phone vibrated against airplane mode's prison and displayed just long enough for panic to ignite the name Nora. I couldn't answer. I watched the message appear, only the preview. He's stable, but... The words hung there, an unfinished sentence that ate the rest of the sky. I closed my eyes and counted backwards from 100, the way I taught my freshmen before exams. By 63, I remembered the year Daniel broke his arm falling off a backyard fence, how he tried not to cry because the twins next door were watching. By 20, I remembered tucking the cast into a trash bag for his shower, the way he laughed when I called him a pirate. At 0, the ache changed shape, but didn't leave. We landed hard like a decision. New York smelled like hot metal and possibility even in the morning. I moved fast, carry-on taxi, the routing of a woman who has made up her mind. The driver asked where to, and I said St. Anselm's Hospital, East 71st, and the syllables tasted like coins. As the taxi climbed the FDR, the city reared up in glass and brick, indifferent and alive. I kept checking my phone, no new messages from Sloan. Her social media, I knew, would be a catalog of stemmed glasses and filtered sunsets, friendships cropped to radiance. I used to think that was youth. Now I know it can be camouflage. The hospital was a building that had decided not to be beautiful. Inside, everything was purpose bleach beeps, vinyl chairs that confessed how many bodies had waited in them. I gave the woman at the desk Daniel's name. She typed like the truth was a password she could remember if she didn't hurry. ICU room 8, she said at last. Next elevator, 4th floor. ICU, a small word that swings a big door. The elevator smelled faintly of oranges and fear. I watched the floors blink, 1, 2, 3, and decided without consulting any god that if the doors opened on 4 and I could hold myself upright, I would not cry until I saw him. I owed him a steady mother. He had enough collapsing to do on his own. The hallway was a quiet river of nurses in soft shoes. Room 8 was half closed, a curtain drawn like a shy thought. I slipped inside. There he was. My boy, my man, my first and only son. Pale in a way I had never seen, as if someone had erased him lightly with a kneaded eraser and forgotten to stop. Tubes and numbers made a language I didn't speak. His chest rose. His chest fell. That was the only phrase I understood. Daniel, I said, and my voice did something I didn't know it could. Became every bedtime I ever whispered, every morning I ever nagged, every prayer I ever muttered into laundry. His eyelids shivered but didn't open. A nurse appeared like a mercy. You must be his mother. Yes. I grip the rail the way you grip something anchored when your boat has decided to misbehave. I'm Hannah, she said. He's stable right now. We're running fluids antibiotics. He came in dehydrated tachycardic febrile. It's been brewing. She hesitated. Do you know if he's been keeping up with his medications? The chart suggests some gaps. The question landed like a stone dropped down a well. I heard it hit something deep. My mouth formed the only answer I had. Where's his wife? The nurse's question burned in my ears. Where's his wife? It should have been her name written on the chart, her number on speed dial, her hand gripping the rail by Daniel's bed. Instead, there was only me, a mother who lived 2 states away and had to hear from a neighbor. I don't know. I admitted, my voice sharp with shame and fury. Hannah's lips tightened, but she said nothing more. She adjusted Daniel's IV, smoothed the blanket, and gave me that look. Half professional courtesy, half silent judgment. Then she left me alone in the room with the machine's steady hum. I took his hand. It felt heavy and cool, so unlike the boy who once burned with life. Daniel's knuckles had always been strong, even as a child, gripping his baseball bat, pulling me into the ocean waves, holding his diploma high on graduation day. Now they lay slack, as if the weight of survival had drained the strength from him. I whispered, I'm here, Danny. I won't leave. His chest rose and fell, but his eyes remained closed. The hours blurred. Hospitals have a way of erasing time, morning, afternoon, night, all measured in beeps, vitals, and footsteps in the corridor. I stayed glued to the chair, afraid that if I shifted too far away, I'd lose him. At some point, Hannah returned with a clipboard. We need to confirm some details. Emergency contacts. Has his wife been informed? I pulled my phone out. Sloane's name stared back at me, smug and silent. My messages: where are you? Call me. Daniel is in ICU. Still marked delivered, not read. I felt my blood simmer. She hasn't answered me, I said. The nurse frowned. We'll keep trying too. When she left again, I sat in the stale light of the ICU and thought about my daughter-in-law. Sloane. Always immaculate, always composed. She had the kind of beauty that photographs well angles made for spotlight. At first, I wanted to believe she loved him. I truly did. But even before the wedding, I caught glimpses of her indifference. A party girl with ambition masking disinterest with a charming smile. Daniel had brushed off my worries back then. Mom, she's just young. She knows how to have fun. She balances me out. But balance is a delicate thing. And now, while he lay pale and gasping, where was she? By evening, I couldn't sit still any longer. My body was trembling with exhaustion, but anger gave me motion. I kissed Daniel's forehead and promised I'd return. Then I walked out, hailed a cab, and gave the driver his address. The city's neon glow made everything feel surreal. Shops bustled, horns blared, and the sidewalks pulsed with people laughing, rushing living. My son was fading on a hospital bed, yet the world had the audacity to continue. The apartment building stood tall and polished, the kind of place where marble and glass pretended to mean safety. I climbed the familiar stairs using the spare key Daniel had once slipped me just in case. Inside, silence greeted me. The living room looked staged, not lived in. A glossy sofa, art books stacked, untouched candles burned halfway down. Not a single sign of someone caring for a sick husband. But the bedroom told another story. Dresses were strewn across the bed, shimmering fabric sequins catching the lamplight. High heels littered the floor, their sharp edges gleaming. On the vanity, lipsticks lay uncapped compacts open like tiny stage props, and beside them a champagne flute still half full. I searched the bathroom cabinet. Empty orange pill bottles rolled against the wood. Daniel's prescriptions. None of them refilled. My throat closed. It wasn't just neglect, it was abandonment dressed in designer heels. I sat heavily on the edge of the bed, staring at the glittering dresses. Each shimmer mocked me. Somewhere, while Daniel was hooked to machines, she was laughing in a room filled with music. My phone buzzed, making me jump. I scrambled to grab it, praying it was Daniel waking. But no, it was a notification. A photo. There she was. Sloane. Posted to her own social media just minutes ago. She was on a rooftop bathed in golden city lights, wearing a crimson dress slit high at the thigh, hair curled perfectly, champagne glass raised. Her caption: living life. Because why not? Why not? I clenched my phone so tightly I thought it might crack. Why not? Because your husband is dying. Because you vowed to love him in sickness and in health. Because no one else will stand by his side if not you. But she wasn't there. I was. His mother flown in from another state, abandoned to pick up the pieces she had dropped. By the time I returned to the hospital, my fury had crystallized into resolve. I sat back by Daniel's bed, stroking his hair, whispering memories of his childhood. Stories of when he was 7 and caught a fish bigger than his arm, of the time he stayed up late helping me grade essays because he thought it looked important. I needed him to feel the weight of love pressing into his life, even when the woman he trusted most had betrayed him. The machines beeped steadily. His fingers twitched slightly against mine. A mother's hope clung to that tiny movement like a lifeline, but beneath that fragile hope burned another promise: I would not let Sloane's betrayal remain hidden. Not anymore. The next morning came, not with sunlight, but with the metallic chirp of monitors and the shuffle of nurses changing shifts. I hadn't slept. How could I, with Daniel's breathing so fragile beside me? I kept one hand on his wrist, counting his pulse whenever fear woke me from the half-dreams that exhaustion forced. When the nurse checked in at dawn, she gave me that careful smile, the one hospital staff reserve for families who haven't gone home. "You should rest, Mrs. Ellison," she said softly. I shook my head. Mothers don't rest. Not when their children are like this. But when she left, my eyes burned from staying open too long. I stood, stretched the stiffness from my back, and walked to the window. Outside, the city woke with ruthless indifference, cabs honking, steam rising from the grates, people hurrying as if life had no fractures. I pressed my hand to the glass and whispered, "Hold on, Danny, just hold on." Around mid-morning, I couldn't bear the silence any longer. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through Sloane's social media feed. Each photo was like a slap. Her red dress shimmered under rooftop lights, her lips painted perfectly curved into a smile that could sell perfume. Friends clung to her on either side, their laughter spilling into captions littered with champagne emojis. Not a single mention of her husband. Not a single word about Daniel's fight for life. I felt my chest tighten with something sharper than grief rage, the kind that comes only when love is mocked. How dare she? How dare she celebrate while he withered? I closed the app, disgust rising in my throat, and turned back to Daniel. "She doesn't deserve you," I whispered. "She never did." Later, I ventured out for coffee, leaving Daniel in the nurse's care. The hospital cafeteria was a strange limbo, families huddled with styrofoam cups, doctors rushing with clipboards, a toddler crying because her muffin broke in half. I carried my coffee back to the ICU waiting area, but as I passed the lobby, I saw something that froze me in place. Sloane. She was breezing through the glass doors like a queen returning from vacation. Her sunglasses were enormous, her hair cascading in soft curls, and she wore the same crimson dress from her party photos, though now paired with a designer coat draped casually over her shoulders. In her hand dangled a small shopping bag, the logo of an upscale boutique stamped in gold. I watched her stride to the reception desk, her heels clicking like applause. She leaned in, lowered her glasses, and said something with a practiced pout. The receptionist nodded politely, then pointed toward the elevators. I felt the blood drain from my face. I followed her silently, my coffee cooling in my hand, my fury heating in my chest. When I reached Daniel's room again, she was already inside, perched by his bedside like an actress rehearsing a role. She had slipped off her sunglasses, her expression arranged into a mask of concern. "Oh, darling," she cooed, brushing a lock of hair from his forehead. "You look so pale. I should have been here sooner." My jaw clenched. "Yes, you should have." She turned startled, her painted lips parting in surprise. "Margaret," she said as if we were old friends bumping into each other at a cafe. "I didn't know you were here." "Of course you didn't," I replied coldly. "You were too busy at parties." Her eyes flickered just for a second before she recovered, sliding her sunglasses onto the vanity table. "I needed a break. It's been stressful." Stressful, I stepped closer, my voice low but sharp. "Your husband collapsed. He's in ICU. And you were drinking champagne under the stars." Her smile thinned. "Don't be dramatic. He's always been fragile. The doctors are taking care of him. I can't stop my life every time he catches something." Every word cut deeper. Fragile. Stop my life. As though Daniel were a burden, not a partner. I wanted to scream, to drag her out by the wrist and show her the empty pill bottles, the photos she posted while he suffered. But Daniel stirred faintly, his eyelids fluttering, and I forced myself into silence for his sake. Sloane leaned back, inspecting her manicure. "Besides," she said lightly, "he wouldn't want me moping around. He hates when I'm sad." I swallowed my fury, but inside something hardened. She was too polished, too indifferent. She thought her performance was flawless. But I had already seen the truth, seen the glittering dresses, the untouched prescriptions, the rooftop revelry. This wasn't just neglect. This was betrayal in its purest form. That night, as I sat beside Daniel's bed, I realized I had a choice. I could confront her now, scream until the walls shook, or I could do something stronger, smarter. I could collect everything. The pill bottles, the party photos, the nurses' testimonies. I could build the truth brick by brick, until no mask of hers could withstand it. I stroked Daniel's hand and whispered, "Rest, my boy. I'll make sure she never hurts you again." The machines hummed their steady rhythm, and for the first time since I arrived, I felt a spark of power burn through my grief. This wasn't just about saving Daniel. It was about exposing Sloane. And when the time came, I would make sure her world of glitter and glass shattered for all to see. Have you ever been in a situation like this? If you were in this situation, would you forgive or take revenge? Comment below to let us know. The ICU smelled faintly of bleach and metal, a scent that clung to my clothes, no matter how often I stepped outside. I had spent the night in that stiff vinyl chair, half dozing, half praying that Daniel's heart monitor would keep its rhythm. Every beep was a tether, proof that he was still with me. When morning came, a doctor entered the room with the cautious tread of someone who carried more truth than anyone wanted to hear. His coat was pristine, his glasses perched low, and his eyes sharp but kind. He introduced himself as Dr. Patel, Daniel's attending physician. "Mrs. Ellison," he began, pulling a chair beside me. "I wanted to update you on your son's condition." I straightened, bracing myself. "Daniel is very ill. He was admitted with acute pneumonia, severe dehydration, and dangerously low potassium levels. His body has been under stress for some time. He hasn't been following through on his medications and has missed several follow-up appointments. Did you know about this?" My stomach dropped. No, I didn't. I didn't even know he was this sick. No one told me. Dr. Patel's eyes softened. "It happens. Sometimes patients don't want to worry their families. But this level of neglect is concerning. He should have been admitted weeks ago." Weeks. I looked at my son, his lips pale, his chest rising shallowly under the hospital blanket. My Daniel, who once ran cross-country, who stayed up late writing speeches for debate club, who called me every Mother's Day with a bouquet of lilies. And now I was being told his decline had stretched on for weeks, while no one had raised the alarm. Doctor, I asked quietly, how bad is it? Honestly, he hesitated only a second before replying. He's stable for now, but he's not out of danger. If we'd gotten to him any later. He trailed off. I finished the sentence myself. He might not have survived. The weight of it pressed into my chest like a stone. When the doctor left, I sat for a long time holding Daniel's hand and replaying his words. Missed medications, missed appointments. Who was supposed to make sure he followed through? He had a wife. She lived under the same roof. Didn't she notice the fevers, the shortness of breath, the way he must have been collapsing inside, unless she had noticed and simply chosen not to care? Later that afternoon, I couldn't stop myself from going back to their apartment. I needed to see for myself, to dig deeper. Maybe I would find notes, reminders, something that explained why he had been allowed to fall so far. The doorman, an older gentleman named Luis, recognized me instantly, his brow furrowed with concern. Mrs. Ellison, I'm glad you're here. Daniel's been struggling for a while. He came through that lobby coughing so badly last week I offered to call an ambulance. But his wife... He hesitated. What about his wife? I pressed. Luis lowered his voice. She told him not to make a scene, said he'd be fine if he just rested. Then she left in a car with her friends. I swallowed hard. Did she know how bad it was? Luis gave me a look that said everything. She knew. My hands trembled as I thanked him and went upstairs. Inside the apartment, the same emptiness greeted me, but this time I searched carefully. In the kitchen, the fridge was nearly bare. Takeout containers, wilted lettuce, a half-empty bottle of champagne. On the counter sat an unopened box of antibiotics, still sealed with Daniel's name on the label. The date showed it had been prescribed 3 weeks ago. In the bedroom, I checked the nightstand drawers. Inside, I found another prescription, this one for an inhaler, untouched. Beneath it lay a folded letter from his insurance provider, warning that missed follow-ups could jeopardize coverage. My heart clenched. He had been drowning in sickness, and the tools to save him were right here, untouched, ignored. I looked around at the silk dresses draped across the chair, the perfume bottles lined neatly on the dresser, the heels scattered like trophies. It was all so loud, so glaring in contrast to the silence of his suffering. That evening, I returned to the hospital carrying the unopened prescriptions with me. Hannah, the nurse, gasped softly when I showed her. These are weeks old, she said. If he'd taken them, it would have changed everything. I felt heat rise in my chest, fury mingling with despair. He wasn't alone. He had someone here. Someone who should have cared. Hannah didn't answer, but her silence said what she couldn't. Sloane breezed in later that night, this time in a sequined blazer, her hair swept up like she'd stepped out of a magazine shoot. She carried a latte in one hand, her phone in the other, tapping away without looking at me. When she finally glanced up, her smile was sharp. Oh, Margaret. You look tired. Hospitals really do drain a person, don't they? I stared at her, my jaw tight. He nearly died, Sloane. He's here because someone didn't make sure he got the care he needed. She rolled her eyes. Don't start blaming me. Daniel's a grown man. He makes his own choices. My voice broke low and shaking with fury. He trusted you. She shrugged, sipping her latte. Trust doesn't mean babysitting. I can't give up my life just because he's sick. For a moment, I thought I might strike her, but I didn't. Instead, I tucked the empty pill bottles deeper into my bag, keeping my silence like a weapon. Because I realized something then, shouting at her wouldn't fix this. But gathering proof piece by piece would. She thought she was untouchable. But soon enough, she'd learn the truth had sharp edges. That night, I sat by Daniel's bed again, my heart aching as I watched the machines breathe for him. I leaned close and whispered, Don't give up, Danny. I'm here now. And I won't let her get away with this. The fight wasn't just about his health anymore. It was about justice. about pulling the mask off the woman who smiled for cameras while letting her husband fade in silence. I pressed his hand to my cheek. His skin was warm now thanks to the fluids and antibiotics. There was hope. And that hope fueled a fire inside me. I would not rest until the world knew the truth. Morning blurred into a pale strip of light across the ICU floor. I'd slept in fragments again, my body learning the choreography of the vinyl chair and the soft alarms. When Hannah came to change the IV bag, she said gently, "If you need to go home for a shower or to grab essentials, I'll stay with him. He's stable." Stable. A word like a button barely holding a coat closed in the wind. "I'll be quick," I said. "I'll bring his wallet and insurance card if I find them." She nodded. "And any medication lists you can locate. It helps us reconcile what's missing." I kissed Daniel's temple, whispered that I would be right back, and walked out with the feeling that every step away from him was a betrayal I had to commit to keep him alive. The apartment greeted me the way it had the day before, beautiful, indifferent. I stood in the doorway listening. Silence except for a distant siren and the radiator's ancient lungs. For the first time since arriving in New York, I let myself enter, as if I lived here. I flicked on the kitchen light and opened every cabinet, every drawer. In the fridge, 2 limp limes almond milk past its date, a restaurant bag with truffle fries hardened into props. On the door, an unopened probiotic shot Virtue in a bottle, untouched. The counter held a tidy stack of mail secured with a gold clip. I broke the neatness. A letter from his insurer, final notice, coverage at risk due to missed follow-up visits. Another envelope from his primary care office. "We attempted to reach you regarding abnormal labs. The dates were weeks old." My breath fogged the room. On the small marble island lay a delicate glass dish shaped like a palm. Inside it, receipts curled like sleeping insects. I smoothed them flat. Rooftop Bar Tabs Boutique purchases a blowout salon appointment stamped with the same afternoon Daniel had fainted by the elevators. I took photos of everything, hands steady now with purpose. Evidence doesn't shake. It records. I moved down the hallway to their bedroom. Daylight sifted through sheer curtains, scattering itself on a battlefield of clothes. Sloane's vanity gleamed like an altar-mirrored tray's perfume bottles in orderly ranks, a velvet-lidded box of lashes. Between a gold comb and a compact lay a square ivory envelope hand-lettered in ink that arched like a swan's neck. I slid the card out. "Easton Tower Charity Gala Rooftop, 8 p.m., black tie." A note in the corner, presumably from a publicist friend. "You better come. Guest list is insane." The date matched the night the ambulance took Daniel. I flipped the card and found a thin wristband tucked inside the kind they snap on before you step into other people's wealth. I photographed the invitation, the wristband, the vanity spread. A lipstick rested uncapped beside them, its bullet flattened slightly from recent use, a smear the color of a bruise rubbed onto a tissue. I opened the vanity drawer and found a slender planner monogrammed, of course, its pages, a choreography of fittings, soft launches, and content days. On the day of Daniel's first flagged labs, shoot Champagne Series 5-7. On the date his doctor warned of follow-ups, PR dinner 9 p.m. Don't be late. In the bathroom trash, the evidence was more vulgar. A spent lash glue, a crumpled wristband identical to the one at the vanity, a glittering confetti star adhered to the rim like an afterthought. Beneath it all, an unopened thermometer still sealed. I held it for a long second. They had owned the tool to take his temperature. They'd chosen sparkle instead. My phone buzzed. A text from Nora. "Nora. The doorman printed the log you asked about. I can bring it up. Me, please." A few minutes later, a soft knock. Nora appeared with her sweater half-buttoned and her eyes kind. She held out a single sheet. "Louise said he keeps a record for emergencies. I told him you were Daniel's mother." On the page 9:41 p.m., Mrs. S exits with 2 guests. 11:57 p.m. Mrs. S. returns, changes exits with one guest. 2:13 a.m. Ambulance arrival. 2:20 a.m. Mr. E. transported. My fingertips tingled. Did you see him that night? I asked. Nora exhaled. Around 10, I knocked. He was on the sofa sweating. I said we should call someone. He said Sloane was handling it. She winced. I'm sorry. I should have called anyway. This isn't yours to carry, I said. Thank you for telling me. She lingered, eyes skimming the chaos of dresses. Do you need help with anything? Yes, I said, surprising myself. Would you be willing to write what you saw? Just a short note with the time. I don't know yet what I'll do, but I don't want it to depend on memory. Of course. She took a pen from her pocket as if she'd anticipated this, and wrote carefully on the back of the log. The ink looked like witness marks. When she was done, she squeezed my arm and left. I turned to the nightstands. In Daniel's drawer, a leather wallet, his insurance card, a folded photo of him at 12 with that ridiculous crooked sun kite. Underneath, a blank hospital emergency contacts form from months ago, signed but never filled. Spouse left empty, as if even paper had sensed the deficit. I photographed that too. The last place I checked was the hall closet. Behind garment bags and a ring light, a shoebox labeled Keep. Inside their marriage license, a few travel stubs and, oddly, a small velvet pouch containing a flash drive. I hesitated, then slipped it into my pocket. I didn't know what lived there. I only knew secrets prefer small containers. Before leaving, I tidied as if to apologize to the room for my invasion. I brought a change of clothes for Daniel's soft t-shirts he used to steal from my laundry basket when he visited, because they smelled like home. On the kitchen table, I lined up the unopened antibiotics and the inhaler like something from a cautionary diorama, then tucked them into my bag. The weight felt righteous. Downstairs, Luis stood as I approached. I told your son once, he said quietly, you don't have to be brave alone. His face folded with effort. He's a good man. He is, I said, and I will make sure people act like it. On my way back to the hospital, my phone lit with a notification, Sloane's latest story. I shouldn't have looked. I did. A mirror selfie in a public restroom, her sequined blazer catching the light, captioned running on fumes, but still showing up. The timestamp overlapped precisely with Dr. Patel's morning rounds. When I reached the ICU, the hallway aired a hush that made me walk softer. Daniel's color was better, the fever bending. I pressed his fingers and felt a faint squeeze. Involuntary maybe, but it carved my name back onto the day. Hannah glanced at the bag on my shoulder. Find anything enough, I said. Enough to start. I laid the insurance card on the counter, gave her the medication names, dates. She copied them into the chart. This helps, she said. It gives us leverage with pharmacy and pays for a case manager to push authorizations. Then, after a beat, I can't comment on family dynamics. But patients do better when their circle actually shows up. She shows up for cameras, I said, and hated the bitterness in my mouth. Do you document visitors? We record comings and goings for ICU, she said. Why? Because she's about to tell people she's been here every minute. Hannah gave me a look, both careful and fierce. We'll tell the truth if asked. I stepped into the corridor to make one more call. The number belonged to a pharmacist friend back home, a woman who had watched my students grow and my hair gray. Hypothetically, I asked if someone sits on antibiotics for pneumonia and an inhaler for wheezing for weeks. She didn't let me finish. They gamble with a life and call it busy. When I hung up, I saved our messages into a folder on my phone called For Daniel. Inside it, photos of invitations, logs, prescriptions, the insurer's warning, Nora's note. Each file felt like a bead on a rosary, a prayer that ends with truth. Sloane arrived as twilight slid down the windows, carrying a shopping bag and a latte, as if both proved virtue. I brought you a sweater, babe, she trilled to a man still drifting under sedation. Then she turned to me, voice sugar-coated. I was here late last night. You must have missed me. I let the lie be. Lies hang better when they have rope. That's good, I said evenly. Staff appreciate families who are present. She preened. I'm documenting this. People need to see real life, not just the pretty parts. Real life. I repeated, thinking of a sealed thermometer and a wristband glittering in trash. How novel. Her phone pinged a message preview from a contact labeled Maddie PR Vireo Lounge soft launch tonight. Press plus influencers. You and Sloane's thumb hovered, then tapped the decision easy. I took in a breath that reached someplace old and steady inside me. If you go, I said softly, don't worry. I'll be here. She smiled, relieved to be dismissed. You're the best, she chirped, and left the room, taking her fragrance and her absence with her. I turned back to Daniel, to the slow and stubborn rise of his chest. Rest, I murmured. I'm almost done gathering the pieces. Outside, the city tuned itself for night rooftops, warming music threading up elevator shafts. I looked at my phone, at the folder named for Daniel, and at the notification still sitting open: Vireo Lounge soft launch. I could see it already. The room, the lights, the clicks, the lens she lives for. Parties had been her alibi. Tonight, they'd be my witness. By the time the sky folded into a dark quilt of lights, I knew where she would be. The invitation, the PR texts, the glitter that trailed behind her like breadcrumbs. Sloane was predictable in her vanity. Tonight she would not be at her husband's bedside. Tonight, she would be where the cameras burned brightest. I waited until Hannah returned to check Daniel's vitals. Will you be with him a while? I asked, rising from the chair that had molded itself to my body. Yes, she said firmly. Go clear your head. He'll be stable tonight. I nodded, though my head was not what needed clearing. My anger needed direction. The taxi let me off outside Vireo Lounge, a rooftop club poised like a jeweled crown above the city. Even from the street, I could hear the pulse of music, feel the tremor of laughter spilling from the glass walls high above. A line of influencers, their clothes brighter than their eyes, waited by the velvet rope. I wasn't dressed for this world. A plain coat, sensible shoes, grief etched into the corners of my face. Yet something about that made me invisible, and invisibility has its uses. Inside the lobby, I slipped into the elevator with a group of women draped in sequins and silk. One of them laughed into her phone. Yes, she's coming. Of course she wouldn't miss it. My stomach tightened. When the elevator doors opened, the rooftop unfolded like a stage, fairy lights strung across the skyline, champagne flutes catching fire from the city's glow, music thudding like a second heartbeat. I moved through the crowd, slowly scanning faces. And there she was. Sloane stood at the center, as if the party orbited around her. She wore a silver dress that cut low in the back, her hair pinned up to expose a long, glittering necklace. In one hand, a glass of champagne. In the other, her phone raised at the perfect angle. She tilted her head, lips parted in that calculated smile. Flash, applause, hashtags waiting to be born. I froze, my chest tightening. Just hours ago, the doctor had warned me my son might not survive the night if his treatment hadn't begun. And here was his wife. His wife laughing as if she hadn't heard a word. I clenched my fists. Anger threatened to pour out of me in front of everyone. But I remembered the folder on my phone, the proof I'd been gathering. Tonight wasn't about fury, it was about evidence. I slipped to the bar, ordered a club soda, and pretended to blend into the crowd. From there, I watched. She posed with a man in a designer suit, his hand lingering too long at her waist. She leaned close to whisper something in his ear, and her laughter spilled out unrestrained. Snapshots of betrayal unfolding in real time. I pulled out my phone and took photos, the flash off the angle discreet. Another bead on the rosary of evidence. At one point, she excused herself to the restroom. I followed at a distance, careful not to be seen. When she set her phone on the counter to reapply lipstick, she scrolled through her notifications. I glimpsed her screen reflected in the mirror, comments pouring in on her latest post. You look stunning. Couple goals obsessed with this outfit. Not a single word about Daniel. Not even a whisper of his suffering. She didn't post the hospital visits because she didn't make them. She posted herself. Always herself. Back at the hospital later that night, the contrast nearly shattered me. The rooftop's pulse still echoed in my ears as I stepped into the ICU's quiet hum. Daniel was curled in his bed, his face slack, colorless. His machines glowed soft and constant guardians against the dark. I set down my bag, slipped into the chair, and took his hand. I saw her. I whispered, my throat tight. I saw what she does when you're here fighting for air. Don't worry, Danny. I'll make sure the world sees it too. His eyelids fluttered just faintly. Maybe a dream. Maybe some part of him heard me. I leaned close, tears burning my eyes. You always carried everyone else's weight. Now let me carry this for you. But as I sat there watching him sleep, I realized something with bone-deep clarity. This wasn't just about proving Sloane's neglect. It was about protecting Daniel's dignity, about making sure no one reduced him to a footnote in her glamorous story. That night, I organized every photo, every receipt, every testimony into folders. I labeled them carefully: neglect, evidence, witnesses, timeline. Each file was a weapon, each detail a nail in the coffin of her lies. I didn't know yet when or how I'd use them, but I knew the stage was coming, and when the curtain rose, she would have nowhere to hide. The day after the rooftop party, the hospital became a cocoon of whispered updates and sterile light. Daniel was improving slowly thanks to the antibiotics and fluids, but his body still trembled under the weight of neglect. I spent the morning by his side, reading aloud from an old novel he loved as a boy, Treasure Island. He didn't stir, but I imagined the words threading into his dreams, reminding him of adventure, of being young, of seas not yet sailed. But even as I read, my mind wasn't steady. It circled one thought like a hawk. She's still out there laughing, playing the devoted wife online while Daniel lies here half broken. I couldn't let her continue. By afternoon, I learned through Nora that Sloane had another event scheduled that evening. It's some kind of launch party, she whispered when I called. Everyone in that circle will be there. Launch party. Another chance for her to polish her mask. I closed the book on Daniel's lap and whispered, "Tonight I'll confront her. For you." The Vareo Lounge had been decadent, but tonight's venue outdid itself. A gilded ballroom on Madison Avenue, chandeliers, dripping crystals, the kind of place where people sipped cocktails that cost more than my week's groceries. I walked in wearing the same plain coat and sensible shoes. Again, invisibility was my disguise. At first, I thought I might not find her. But then the crowd shifted, and there she was, Sloane, draped in emerald silk, her hair a cascade of glossy waves, her diamond earrings glittering like twin stars. She stood in the center of a circle of admirers, her laughter ringing through the music. Cameras flashed. Every pose, every tilt of her chin rehearsed to perfection. And then my breath caught. She lifted her glass and announced loudly, "My husband's doing better now. It's all thanks to me staying strong." The circle applauded. Applauded as if her absence had been strength, as if her neglect had been devotion. My hands trembled. This was the moment. I pushed forward. "That's a lie." The laughter stilled, the chatter thinned. Heads turned. Sloane froze her glass halfway to her lips. Her eyes met mine, sharp with disbelief. "Margaret," she said, her voice dripping with surprise. "What are you doing here? I should ask you the same." I replied, my voice steady, louder now. "Your husband is in ICU fighting for his life, and here you are, dressed in silk, sipping champagne, telling the world you've been at his side." A ripple ran through the crowd. Some stepped back, eager for spectacle. Others leaned closer, hungry for gossip. Sloane's smile twitched, but she forced it back. "You're mistaken. I've been there for him every day." I pulled out my phone, my thumb poised. "Really? Because this was you." I swiped to the photo from the rooftop party, her arm around another man, her champagne glass raised high. Gasps shivered through the onlookers. "And this," I said, flipping to the receipts, "the boutique bags, the invitation. While he was collapsing in your apartment, you were buying dresses and posting selfies. When the ambulance came, you weren't even home." Her mask cracked. "Stop this," she hissed, her voice trembling now. "You don't understand." "No, I understand perfectly," I said, stepping closer until I could see the panic in her eyes. "You married him for the life he could give you, not the love he carried. And when his body gave way, you left him. You abandoned him while strangers called the ambulance." The silence in the room was absolute, broken only by the bass of the distant speakers. Someone muttered, "Is that true?" Another whispered, "I see you." She never said. Her hand shook as she set down her glass. "You're making a scene." "Yes," I said firmly. "Because Daniel deserves someone to fight for him, not someone who disappears when the lights dim." I expected her to lash out, but instead she tried to reclaim her mask. She laughed, brittle and sharp. "You think anyone believes a bitter old woman over me? These people know me. They know I've been working so hard to balance everything." I straightened. Working, balancing. He had unopened prescriptions sitting in your kitchen, antibiotics that could have saved him weeks ago, an inhaler never touched, bills warning about missed appointments. All while you flitted from gala to gala. That's not balance. That's negligence. Her face blanched. The crowd murmured louder now. A few pulled out their phones recording. Her perfect narrative slipping through her hands. "Why are you doing this?" she spat. "Because he can't," I said simply. "Because he's lying in a hospital bed too weak to defend himself. But I'm not weak. And I won't let you bury him under your lies." For the first time I saw her falter, not with anger but with fear. Not of me, but of the truth unraveling in front of witnesses who would never forget. She grabbed her purse, muttered something about needing air, and swept toward the exit. But the whispers followed her, sticky and sharp. "Is it true I see you abandoned him?" I stood there, my hands shaking, my heart pounding. For a moment I thought I might collapse under the weight of it all. But then I remembered Daniel, pale and frail, his fingers twitching against mine in the hospital bed. This wasn't collapse. This was the beginning. Back at the hospital, I sank into the chair by his side once more. His breathing was steady, his face calmer. I stroked his hair and whispered, "They know now. I made them see. And I won't stop until everyone knows the truth." His eyelids flickered as though some part of him understood. And in that fragile movement I found strength again. The battle wasn't over, but tonight the mask had cracked. And soon it would shatter. The confrontation at the launch party spread like a stain I couldn't scrub clean. By the next morning, my phone buzzed with messages from Nora, even one from Luis the doorman. "People are talking," Nora wrote. "They saw her storm out." Words getting around. I should have felt satisfaction. Instead, I felt something colder resolve. A single scene wasn't enough. Sloane's mask had cracks, but masks can be patched. What I needed was to reveal not just her neglect, but the heart of her motives, the why behind her indifference. Because I had lived long enough to know people don't abandon for nothing. They abandon for gain. That afternoon, I returned to the apartment. The doorman didn't ask questions this time. He just gave me a solemn nod as if he knew I carried permission that went deeper than any key. Inside, I searched with a sharper eye. This time, I wasn't just looking for negligence, I was looking for intent. The first clue was financial. In a drawer beneath Daniel's desk, I found a folder marked Investments. Bank statements, property documents, account summaries. My son had worked hard. He had built something real. But as I flipped through the papers, a sick realization washed over me. Nearly every recent withdrawal was large and unusual. 10,000 here, 15 there, always signed by Daniel, but the dates aligned too perfectly with the boutique receipts. The party invitations, the content days scribbled in Sloane's planner. She was siphoning him dollar by dollar, turning his hard-earned security into sequins and champagne. A knock startled me. It was Nora holding a small stack of envelopes. "These came to my mailbox by mistake," she said. I took them, thanked her, and opened them after she left. Credit card statements. Multiple accounts in Daniel's name but clearly used by someone else. Luxury brands, nightclubs, salons, a pattern of excess. And tucked between them, one envelope, addressed not to Daniel but to Sloane. I hesitated, then tore it open. Inside was a letter from a law office. The words hit like stones. Power of attorney. Draft. My blood ran cold. She hadn't just been neglecting him. She'd been positioning herself to control him, to gain access to everything when he became too weak to resist. I gathered the papers into my bag and rushed back to the hospital. My hands shook as I spread the documents across the small table by Daniel's bed. Hannah walked in and raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong?" she asked. I showed her the letter. She was planning to take over. His accounts, his decisions, everything. Hannah's jaw tightened. "If that's true, you'll need a lawyer. And soon." The word felt heavy. A lawyer. Yes. But first I needed more witnesses who could confirm what these papers only hinted. That evening I met with Luis in the lobby. He lowered his voice. "I don't usually talk about residents' private lives, but for Daniel, I'll make an exception." He told me about nights Daniel stumbled through the lobby pale and weak, while Sloane swept past without a glance. He told me how she once returned from a weekend away dragging shopping bags, and when Louise asked if she knew her husband hadn't left the apartment in 3 days, she shrugged and said, "He'll be fine. He just needs to rest." Each word cut deeper, but it also built the case. Piece by piece, the truth formed. She didn't just neglect him, she was waiting. Waiting for him to weaken enough that control could slip neatly into her hands. When I returned to Daniel's room that night, I sat beside him and whispered, "I know now." She wasn't just careless. She wanted you weak. She wanted your silence so she could own everything you built. His chest rose and fell, his breath a little stronger now. I imagined in some hidden place within his dreams he was fighting too. I took his hand. "But you're not alone. I will not let her win." The next day, Sloane arrived at the hospital. Her makeup was impeccable, but her eyes darted nervously, searching the staff who now looked at her with guarded suspicion. She sank into the chair opposite me, crossing her legs. "I heard about your little performance," she said, her tone sharp as glass. "Performance?" I tilted my head. "No, that was truth. Something you wouldn't recognize." She smirked, but her hands fidgeted with her phone. "You don't know how hard this has been on me. I've had to manage so much. The bills, the appearances. Daniel wouldn't want me to fall apart." I leaned forward, lowering my voice. "Daniel wouldn't want you draining his accounts. He wouldn't want you drafting power of attorney documents behind his back." "I've seen them, Sloane." Her face drained of color. "You went through our things, I went through my son's things." I snapped. "The things you were burying under silk and champagne." For the first time, she faltered, her lips trembling before she forced a brittle laugh. "No one will believe you." "They already do," I said. "Neighbors, staff, the doctors who never saw you here, the receipts and photos, your own posts." Her phone buzzed and she glanced at it, panic flashing across her face before she quickly tucked it away. I knew then she was losing control of the story she had so carefully built. That night, as I sat with Daniel, I thought about the slow unraveling of lies. It doesn't happen with one revelation. It happens with 100 small truths, each one pulling at the threads until the mask falls apart. And I had more than threads now. I had rope. I squeezed Daniel's hand and whispered, "The world will see her for what she is. I promise you that." His eyelids flickered again, a faint movement that felt like agreement. And I knew soon the reckoning would come. I don't think I'd ever felt time move so slowly. Every second in that hospital room was like standing at the edge of a cliff waiting for either collapse or salvation. Daniel's chest rose and fell, his breath steadier now, but still fragile. Every inhale a reminder of how close I had come to losing him. And yet my mind wasn't only on his pulse or his color anymore. It was on the folder in my bag, fattened with truth Sloane could no longer bury. Proof of unopened prescriptions, neighbors' testimony, financial drains, a drafted power of attorney that smelled more like betrayal than legal necessity. It was enough. Enough to unravel her lies in front of everyone. The only question was when. That evening, I stepped out into the ICU waiting area to make calls. I rang an old friend, Caroline, a retired lawyer who had once helped me handle my late husband's estate. She answered on the second ring. "Margaret," she said, warmth coating her voice. "I heard you were in New York." "How's Daniel alive?" I whispered. "But barely. And I need your advice." I explained everything, Sloane's neglect, her absence at the worst moment, the documents I'd found. Silence stretched on the other end before Caroline finally spoke. "You have more than enough for a legal case," she said firmly. "But Margaret, this isn't just about court. This is about perception. People believe what they see. You need witnesses. You need an audience. If you want to stop her from taking control, make sure no one can ever defend her actions." Her words sank into me like seeds. I already had the evidence. Now I needed to plant it where it couldn't be ignored. When I returned to Daniel's room, Sloane was already there, perched on the chair like a visiting celebrity. She had swapped her emerald dress for a tailored suit jacket, but the effect was the same, polished, untouchable. She looked up at me with narrowed eyes. "We need to talk," she said. I didn't sit. "About what?" "About appearances." She smoothed her lapel. "I know you don't like me, Margaret, but the truth is, people listen to me. They believe me. If we both present a united front that I've been supportive, that I've cared, then this won't blow back on Daniel. Think of his career, his reputation." I almost laughed. "You're worried about his reputation? Not his life. Not the fact that he nearly died because of your negligence." Her lips tightened. "You think you're helping him, but all you're doing is making a scene. Do you want people to pity him? To see him as weak? That's not what he would want." I stepped closer, close enough to see the faint shimmer of powder covering the exhaustion beneath her eyes. "Do you know what he does want to breathe? To wake up without pain? To have someone by his side who actually loves him? And since you couldn't do that, I will." Her gaze flickered, but she leaned back, feigning calm. "You'll ruin everything if you keep digging." "No," I said quietly. "I'll reveal everything. And when I do, you won't have anywhere to hide." Her mask cracked for just a second, but she stood and left without another word, her heels striking the tile like gavel blows. Later that night, I sat beside Daniel again, scrolling through the folder on my phone. Each photo, each note, each timestamp was a brick. Together they built a wall of undeniable truth. I whispered to him, though he slept, "You don't have to fight her. I'll do it for you. I'll show everyone what she's done." His fingers twitched faintly in mine as if answering. I leaned closer, tears stinging my eyes. "How do you think they will react when I reveal that to everyone? To your colleagues, to the doctors, to her glittering friends who clap at her lies? They'll see the truth, Daniel. And when they do, she won't just lose you. She'll lose everything she tried to steal." I kissed his hand and rested my forehead against it. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield was tilting, and I was ready for the fight. The next morning began with promise. Daniel's fever had broken in the night, his skin cooler beneath my hand. His breathing steadier too, no longer as shallow or ragged. For the first time since I'd arrived in New York, I allowed myself to exhale without tasting fear. But peace in a hospital is always fragile. Around mid-afternoon, the monitors shifted. A flat, shrill alarm pierced the room. I shot up from my chair. Daniel's body convulsed with a cough so violent it seemed to tear him apart. Nurses rushed in the room, filling with clipped commands, BP dropping, "Get respiratory on standby. We're losing saturation." I stumbled back against the wall, clutching my chest as though my own lungs had collapsed. "Daniel," I cried, but no sound from me could anchor him. A nurse pushed me gently toward the hall. "Please, ma'am. We need space." I stood outside the door, watching through the small glass panel as a team of strangers swarmed my son. Tubes, masks, machines. His body arching, falling still. My nails dug into the cold metal frame of the door until my hands ached. In that instant, I thought, this is it. This is where he leaves me. The crash lasted 12 minutes, though it felt like 12 years. Finally, Dr. Patel emerged, his face drawn tight. "He's stable again," he said, his voice carrying the gravity of a verdict. "But it was close. Very close. His lungs are compromised and his body is exhausted. We'll monitor him closely tonight." I nodded, unable to find words. My legs trembled as I sank back into the vinyl chair, staring at Daniel's pale form beneath the machines. My boy held together by wires and will. Hours later, when the ward had quieted, Sloane arrived. She swept in wearing a cocktail dress that sparkled beneath the fluorescent lights, a silk wrap draped over her shoulders. She smelled faintly of wine and perfume. "What happened?" she asked, her voice sharp but oddly detached. "He nearly died," I said flatly. She gasped, a hand flying to her lips, but there were no tears, no raw fear, just performance. "Oh, my poor darling, I would have come sooner, but I had obligations. Obligations." My voice cut. "While your husband was fighting for his life," she waved her hand dismissively. "You don't understand. I can't just disappear from events. People expect me. Daniel knows how important appearances are." I stood, fury boiling over. Appearances. "Do you know what I saw while you were gone? Tubes shoved down his throat, machines keeping his lungs alive. The only appearance that matters is that of a man on the edge of death. And you weren't here." Her mask slipped just a fraction. "I can't watch him like that," she said bitterly. "It makes me uncomfortable." Uncomfortable. My voice shook. "He is suffocating, and you're worried about your comfort." She glared at me, but she didn't answer. Instead, she turned, pulled out her phone, and began typing furiously, as if a curated post could erase the truth. The rest of the night, I didn't leave Daniel's side. I wiped his brow with a damp cloth, whispered stories from his childhood, and prayed to a God I wasn't sure still listened. At one point, his hand twitched in mine. His eyelids fluttered, and he murmured something faint, almost inaudible. I leaned close. "Mom, yes, Danny. I'm here." I whispered, tears sliding freely now. "Don't let her." His voice trailed off, swallowed by the hiss of the oxygen. "I won't," I promised. "I won't ever let her hurt you again." His hand relaxed, but the faint squeeze remained a thread of connection, fragile yet unbreakable. Later, after the nurse urged me to take a short walk, I stepped into the corridor. My body felt hollow, but my mind burned. Every sign pointed the same way. Sloane didn't just neglect him. She wanted him weak, pliable, silent. Tonight had proved it. While he was collapsing, she was somewhere else polishing her image. And when she finally arrived, she showed no fear, no guilt, only annoyance at being interrupted. I knew then this wasn't just about evidence anymore. This was about survival. If Daniel pulled through, he couldn't return to her care. Because her care wasn't care at all. It was a death sentence wrapped in silk. When I returned to the room, I found her gone again. Not a note, not a word. Just the faint echo of her perfume lingering like smoke after a fire. I sank into the chair, pressed my forehead to Daniel's hand, and whispered, "You're not alone. Not while I still have breath." And in that moment, I swore something deeper than revenge. I swore protection. For him. For his future. and for the truth that would one day break her mask entirely. The morning after Daniel's collapse, I sat at the little laminate table in the ICU waiting room, the folder of evidence spread before me like a war map. Each page, each photo, each receipt was a weapon waiting to be used. I no longer had the luxury of hesitation. Daniel's life had been hanging by a thread, and she had treated it like lint on her dress. It was time to make sure everyone knew. I started with Dr. Patel. He entered Daniel's room at mid-morning, his eyes moving quickly over the monitors. Daniel was resting more peacefully, though his color remained gray. "Doctor," I said quietly, "can we speak outside?" In the hallway, I opened my bag and handed him the unopened antibiotics, the inhaler, the insurance warnings. These were in his apartment. Prescriptions never touched. Letters ignored. And this, I slid out the draft of the power of attorney, was hidden in his wife's desk. His brows knit as he flipped through the papers. "This is troubling." Troubling, I snapped, my voice sharper than I intended. "It's neglect. Deliberate or careless, I don't care which. She left him to rot while she drank champagne. She is unfit to make decisions for him." Dr. Patel's gaze softened. "I understand your anger, Mrs. Ellison. We've suspected a lack of support, but this confirms it. I'll notify our case manager immediately, and if his wife attempts to claim medical authority, this evidence will be critical." For the first time in days, I felt the smallest relief. The truth was no longer only mine to carry. Later that afternoon, I found Hannah, the nurse who had cared for Daniel so faithfully. I laid the stack of receipts and photos on the counter at her station. "You've seen who's been here," I said. "You've seen who hasn't." Her jaw clenched. "We document visits." "And you're right. She's barely been here. When she does come, she's on her phone. Never asks questions. Never stays more than half an hour." "Will you say that if asked?" Hannah met my eyes. "Yes. Some things can't stay silent." I knew I couldn't stop there. I needed to face Sloane directly. She arrived just before dinner wearing a cream blazer and oversized sunglasses, as if she were shielding herself from paparazzi no one else could see. She sauntered into Daniel's room, placed a perfunctory kiss on his forehead, and sighed dramatically. "Oh, the stress of all this," she murmured. I barely slept. "You must be exhausted from all your parties," I said coolly. Her head snapped toward me. Still playing Detective Margaret, I stood. My voice was steady, louder than before. "Not detective. Witness." I pulled out the folder and dropped it onto the rolling tray table with a heavy thud. She flinched. "These are the prescriptions you left unopened, the insurance letters you ignored, the receipts from nights you drank while he lay weak in your apartment. And this," I held up the draft of the power of attorney, "is the proof you were preparing to take control of everything he built the moment he was too weak to object." The air in the room thickened. Two nurses nearby paused, watching. "That's not true," she hissed, her face blanching. "Then explain it," I challenged. "Explain why neighbors saw you leaving while he was fevered on the couch. Explain why the doorman logged you returning with shopping bags minutes before the ambulance arrived. Explain your own social media posts, photos of you laughing while he gasped for air." The silence stretched. The nurses exchanged looks. Her voice cracked brittle. "You can't just accuse me like this. I don't need to accuse," I said, cutting her off. "The evidence speaks louder than both of us." I turned to the staff hovering by the door. "You've all seen who is here, who stays, who asks questions, and who doesn't. My son deserves better than a wife who treats his suffering as an inconvenience." One of the nurses nodded almost imperceptibly. The other whispered something into her radio. Sloane's mask shattered, then not into anger, but into panic. Her eyes darted, her hands trembling. She grabbed her bag and muttered, "I don't have to listen to this," before storming out. Her perfume lingered, cloying and sour, but her presence was gone. The room fell quiet again. I slumped back into the chair, drained but steady. Daniel stirred faintly, his eyelids fluttering. I leaned close, clutching his hand. They know now, I whispered. The staff, the doctors, the neighbors. Everyone sees her for what she is. You're not alone anymore, Danny. I'll make sure of it. His lips moved ever so slightly. No words, just the faintest attempt. But that was enough. Enough to remind me why I couldn't stop. As night fell, I stepped into the waiting room. Nora was there holding a thermos of coffee for me. Luis, the doorman, had come on his break, his cap in his hands. They both sat waiting. I realized then I wasn't fighting alone. The circle of truth was widening, drawing in everyone who had seen the cracks. And once the circle grew large enough, no mask could survive. Tomorrow I promised myself I would make it larger still. The following day broke with a chill that crept through the hospital windows. I sat by Daniel's bed watching his chest rise and fall, the soft hiss of the oxygen steady as a metronome. The confrontation with Sloane had shifted something in the air. The staff now looked at me differently, not just as a mother grasping at straws, but as someone telling the truth. Still, truth without witnesses is fragile. And I knew Sloane would fight back. Mid-morning, Caroline, the retired lawyer I had called days earlier, arrived. Her presence was like a firm hand on my shoulder. She sat with me in the waiting room, spreading out the papers I had collected. "You've done well," she said, scanning the drafts and receipts. "But to protect Daniel, we need more than whispers and sympathy. We need testimony, neighbors, staff, people who can stand in the light and say, yes, this happened." I thought of Nora, of Luis, of Hannah and the other nurses. Slowly, a plan began to form. That afternoon, I made quiet visits, first to Luis in the lobby. He looked me in the eye, his face lined with worry. "If they ask me," he said simply, "I'll tell them what I saw." Every time she walked past him like he was a shadow. Then to Nora, who promised to put her note into formal writing. "He was alone that night," she whispered. "I'll swear it." Back in the ward, Hannah squeezed my hand. "If administration questions his care, I'll tell them exactly who showed up and who didn't." Piece by piece, the circle widened. Witnesses, proof, allies. Late in the evening, family began to arrive. My sister flew in from Boston, pale with worry, her arms full of flowers. Two of Daniel's cousins came as well, their faces tight with shock when they saw him so frail. And it was in their presence, with a small crowd gathered in the ICU waiting area, that Sloane chose to arrive. She swept in wearing ivory silk, her makeup flawless, her hair styled as if for a magazine cover. She carried herself like a woman walking into a gala, not an ICU. And worse, she smiled a radiant, false smile, as if the room were full of her admirers. "Family," she declared, her voice warm but hollow. "I'm so glad you're all here. Daniel needs us united. We must stay strong for him." The hypocrisy curdled in my stomach. But this time, I didn't have to stand alone. Caroline stepped forward first. "United?" she asked coolly. "Do you mean the kind of unity that leaves a man alone on his sofa while you sip champagne on rooftops?" The room went still. Sloane's eyes narrowed. "I don't know what you've been told, but you don't need to tell us," I interrupted. My voice rang clear across the waiting room. "We've seen the proof." I opened the folder and laid out the evidence on the coffee table in the center of the room. Unopened prescriptions, receipts, the power of attorney draft. Nora's written testimony, the doorman's logs. One by one, I placed them like cards in a game she could no longer win. "You ignored his medication," I said. "You left him to collapse while you attended parties. You drained his accounts to fund your lifestyle. And when he was weakest, you prepared papers to take control of everything he built." Gasps rippled through the family. Daniel's cousin picked up the insurance letter with shaking hands. This was weeks ago," she whispered. Sloane's smile faltered, then returned brittle and thin. "This is all circumstantial. You can twist anything if you try hard enough." "Circumstantial," Hannah's voice cut from the doorway. She stepped in flanked by another nurse. I've worked in ICU for 15 years. I know which families sit vigil and which ones vanish. You vanished. Every time you came, you left within minutes. You never once asked about his treatment, Louise added quietly. And you told him not to make a scene when he could barely stand. Nora's voice rose trembling but firm. I saw him that night, burning with fever. You walked out with your friends and left him there. I called the ambulance. The weight of testimony filled the room like stones in a jar, each one undeniable. Sloane's face blanched, her mask cracking at last. You're all against me, she hissed, her voice sharp, frantic. You've poisoned them against me. No, I said softly, stepping closer. You did that yourself. With every choice you made, with every party, every receipt, every unopened pill bottle, you chose yourself over him. And now everyone sees it. Her eyes darted wildly, searching for sympathy, but the faces around her were cold. My sister, Daniel's cousins, the neighbors, the staff. The circle had closed. She gathered her bag, her movements jerky now. Fine, she spat. If you all think so little of me, then you can deal with him yourselves. And with that, she stormed out, her heels striking hard against the tile, the door swinging shut behind her like the final note of a requiem. The silence she left behind was thick, heavy. For a moment, no one spoke. Then my sister reached out and squeezed my hand. You saved him, she whispered. I looked back at Daniel's room where the machines still beeped steadily. No, I murmured. I'm only holding him up until he can save himself. But deep inside, I felt the truth settle. The mask was gone. The world had seen. And whatever battles remained, she could never again pretend to be the devoted wife. That night, as I sat once more at Daniel's side, I whispered, She can't touch you anymore, Danny. Not here. Not with all of us watching. You're safe. His hand twitched faintly in mine, and though his eyes remained closed, I felt it like a promise. The hospital corridors were quieter now. The storm had passed, at least for the moment. Sloane's departure left an emptiness behind her, but it wasn't the kind of emptiness that frightened me. It was the kind that came when poison was drained from a wound, raw, painful, but clean. I sat by Daniel's bedside, watching his chest rise and fall. He was still fragile, still tethered to machines, but the color in his cheeks was warmer than days before. Healing had begun slow and stubborn. For hours, I simply held his hand and let the silence fill us both. The circle around us had grown, family stopping in, nurses who lingered longer to check on him, even Nora slipping in with flowers from her balcony. He wasn't alone anymore, and neither was I. The hospital administration called a meeting the next day. Caroline sat beside me, her presence steady, her pen, scratching notes as the case manager outlined the situation. We've reviewed the evidence, the case manager said carefully. Given the documented neglect and the testimony from neighbors and staff, it's clear Mr. Ellison's wife cannot act in his best interests at this time. Caroline leaned forward. Then we'll petition the court to assign medical decision-making to his mother. Effective immediately. The administrator nodded. With what you've gathered, that won't be contested. It wasn't triumph I felt in that moment, but something heavier. Relief. Yes, but also grief. Because this was never a victory I had wanted. A son shouldn't need protection from his own wife. But this was the truth, and truth once spoken cannot be taken back. When Sloane tried to return 2 days later, security turned her away. She made a scene in the lobby, shouting about betrayal, about lies, about her reputation being ruined. But her voice no longer had weight. Louise told me later that people barely looked up from their newspapers as she stormed out. The performance had lost its audience. Daniel remained blissfully unaware of her drama. His body fought hard, his breath steadier with each passing day. And one evening, as I read aloud by his side, his eyes finally opened fully. "Mom," he rasped, his voice dry, broken. I dropped the book, tears springing instantly. Danny, I'm here. He tried to speak, but I hushed him. Don't strain. You've been so sick. But you're safe now. His eyes, dim but alive, searched mine, and though he couldn't form the words, I knew what he wanted to ask. She won't hurt you again, I whispered. Everyone knows the truth. She's gone. He closed his eyes, a faint tear slipping free, and for the first time in weeks, he looked like he believed he might survive. The days that followed blurred with slow healing. I read him stories, updated family, and built a fortress of care around him. Caroline continued the legal process. Nurses came and went, always with softer smiles. Nora visited often, her kindness stitching small comforts into our long hours. And through it all, I thought about the strange, brutal journey, about how betrayal doesn't always arrive with a knife. It can come with a smile, with silk dresses and champagne glasses, with someone who turns away when you need them most. But I also thought about resilience, about how truth gathers strength when it is spoken aloud, about how even in the darkest corridors light grows when people choose to stand together. One evening, as the city glowed through the hospital windows, I whispered to Daniel, "You will rise from this. And when you do, you'll know who truly stood by you. You'll know who loved you enough to fight when you couldn't." He squeezed my hand, faint but certain. Sometimes life reveals itself in ways you don't want, but cannot ignore. I flew to New York expecting a visit, maybe even a weekend of family meals and laughter. Instead, I found my son dying, and the woman who vowed to love him pretending he didn't exist. But I also found something else. I found neighbors who cared enough to call, nurses who stood up when silence was easier, family who gathered when the mask finally fell, and within myself I found a strength I didn't know still lived there, the strength to speak, to gather proof, to demand the truth be seen. Daniel's journey isn't finished. His body is still fragile, his recovery still uncertain. But whatever lies ahead, I know this: he will never again walk alone into the shadows. Not while I breathe. To those listening now, maybe you've faced betrayal. Maybe you've been abandoned when you needed love most. Hear me when I say you are not powerless. The truth may be buried, but it does not die. And when it rises, it shines brighter than any mask. So I ask you, share your story. Let others know they are not alone. And if this story touched you, subscribe to Grace's Truth, where we speak the truths that others hide. Because sometimes the sweetest revenge is simply making sure the truth is heard.